folks, this is Harris Sultan, and the clip that you just saw, that was Sweden. And I'm sure you've heard me say many times before that Sweden is gone. It's not even worth fighting for. I know I have an outsider's bias, and I'm sure people of Sweden don't want to hear it. But the good news is that they are actually fighting back. I have shared this tweet a while ago, a couple of times. Get a load of this. There are more bombs going off in Sweden than in Afghanistan and Pakistan combined. How did this country, just 15 years ago, go from most livable to 30 bomb attacks a month? And they're taking the piss. Look at this. Sweden, 79% of refugees have vacation in countries they fled from. Isn't that amazing? Let's listen to Visegrad interviewing Louis. He's a Yemeni ex-Muslim. Have a listen to what he has to say.
You were an Islamist.
Yes.
Aren't you a successful integration story?
Yes, but I'm an anomaly. I am an exception.
Louis Ahmed, a Yemeni content creator who was also a former refugee in Sweden.
Second largest number of bombings of any country not officially at war, only after Mexico.
I felt like I had been removed from the Middle East and Yemen and placed in a hub for ISIS. Every holiday, you have airplanes going from Sweden back to Syria, Iraq. If Sweden starts stopping people from coming back to Sweden and actually questioning them, wait, you went back to Syria, you don't have a well-founded fear of persecution, then you're not a refugee. There is no multicultural in Sweden or Europe. There are parallel societies that are dysfunctional. Why are so many girls like committing suicide in Balkong, which means balcony girls? And it's basically girls who are thrown off balconies because they've tainted the honor of the family. Deeply problematic social experiment that's not going to end well.
Shooting in Sweden. That deadly truck attack in Sweden.
The burning of the Quran has sparked 4 days of violent clashes in a number of cities.
And that guy who had been burning the Quran, Salwan Momika, he was killed in Sweden, and Sweden refused to give him asylum. Isn't that amazing? They gave asylum to ISIS, Taliban, Islamist jihadis, but not to an ex-Muslim who was fleeing persecution. He said it on record over and over again that he will be killed. Lo and behold, he was killed. That's Sweden for you. So most of these problems that we see in the West, they are self-inflicted. It's just like they want to be destroyed, which is why third parties are emerging. Fringe parties, who used to be called far right-wing populist parties, they're becoming second and first biggest parties in their countries. And in my last video, I showed you how this is about to happen in Australia as well. Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party in Australia, which has been a fringe political party for decades. In my opinion, it's going to become either the second or the biggest political party in Australia, just like Reform did in the UK. Marine Le Pen's party is doing that in France. AFD is doing that in Germany. It's happening all over the world. And the good news is it's about to happen in Sweden as well. More on that. Let's finish this one.
Are you going to be able to teach millions of Muslims that they should accept the burning of the Quran?
Last night, he was shot dead in his apartment.
I would say the gravest mistake in Sweden's history. I saw how the Swedish government and the Swedish system was failing and betraying their own people, and I could no longer trust it. I thought to myself, if this is how you treat the Swedes who built this empire that we're all running to, how are you going to treat me in the future? But this conversation is not going to be had in Sweden until maybe 2030. And I'm so sick of waiting for the Swedes.
Moreover, Sweden was the first European country to allow Sharia patrols.
Att kvinnor i Sverige får sina liv begränsade.
Det här är ju ett mönster som mest liknar könsapartheid, men som faktiskt drabbar både kvinnor och flickor i vissa förorter.
Titta här.
Men en grupp religiösa unga män har ändå hittat hit och stoppar nu tjejer på väg till festen och försöker övertala dem att inte gå in.
Man känner sig sviken. Mitt liv håller på att rasa samman och ingen gör någonting.
They allowed this. I hate the dogs too.
Grannar irriterar sig på att hon lever ensam. Att hon har hundar som enligt tolkningar av islam är ett orent djur. Att hon och hennes vänner tar ett glas vin när de grillar på hennes uteplats.
När man kom hem så kunde blommorna vara...
It's not certain interpretations of Islam. Muhammad hated dogs. It's because if you have dogs in your house, then angels don't enter your house. That's what they believe in. And Muhammad actually made that up because Jews asked him to explain certain verses from the Bible. They were testing him. They were like, well, if you are a true messenger of the same God that we worship, then you should know about these verses. So they waited for 3 days, and Muhammad was like, oh, hang on, how do I tell them? And then later on, Muhammad said that Angel Gabriel was going to come to him and explain him those verses, but because there was a little puppy in the house, that's why Angel Gabriel didn't come, because apparently he's scared of little puppies. So he just purely made it up. He just made it up. And we're left to deal with it.
Förstörda. Ja, saker förstörda.
They allowed this.
Kunde ha kvinnor som kunde klampa in och tala om att här ska ni inte dricka.
It's a curse. When they're fewer in number, that's how they behave. Like, oh, we're so innocent, please. And you feel bad. You're like, well, why are we harassing this Abdul? Why are we harassing this Salma? No. But when they increase in number, this is what they do.
Jag fick höra många gånger att jag skulle skaffa mig en man.
You need a husband. My brother is available, but you're going to have to put a burqa on.
Vem sa det?
Ja, blandat folk härifrån.
Kvinnor, män?
Kvinnor och män.
När vi jobbar kvällstid så är det ju få tjejer ute i miljöerna.
Vad innebär få?
Nästan inga alls.
Almost none.
Al-Azhar-skolans buss kör lågstadiebarnen mellan skolan och bostadsområdena i Tensta och Rinkeby. Flickorna hänvisas till dörren längst bak och pojkarna till de främre dörrarna. Forskaren Devin Rexvid ser en parallell till bussarna i Alabama i USA på 50-talet där svarta tvingades åka längst bak och vita där fram.
Jag känner nu att vi har förlorat mark.
So, that was Sweden. And we have seen time and time again that our mainstream political parties, they kept bending over backwards to these foreign, hostile, primitive, barbaric cultures. First, they let them in, then they release them in their societies, and then they gaslight their own public, making them feel guilty for not accepting these people. So that's Islam in a nutshell for you. But we have seen a new phenomena emerge in pretty much every Western country. As I said in my last video, we are now looking at the emergence of a fringe party becoming possibly the second or the biggest political party in Australia. Pauline Hanson's One Nation. It's not an accident. We saw that happen in the UK, in the case of Reform, and even the Greens. I don't like the Greens, but according to some polls, they have become the second biggest political party. Now they are the true representatives of the left, not Labour. And the Tories are definitely gone. We've seen that in France with Marine Le Pen's party. We've seen that in Germany with the AfD. So it's happening all over the world. So why not in Sweden? Let me introduce you to the Sweden Democrats. Let me tell you who they are. The Sweden Democrats began as a fringe party decades ago, just like many of these other political parties that we see in other Western countries. Over time, they moved toward the mainstream or mainstream adjacent, shedding some of their pariah status by the late 2010s. So why is that happening? Do you see a correlation? Became the third largest party in Sweden. Their rise has been compared to other right-wing anti-immigration populist movements across Europe, like the AfD or Marine Le Pen's political party or the Reform, a trend visible in multiple nations, not just in Sweden. I wonder why that is. I wonder why these extremely enlightened white Europeans are suddenly becoming populist nationalists. I wonder why that is. It's got nothing to do with these Sharia patrols. Right? But anyway, here's some good news. In the 2022 general election, the Sweden Democrats got about 20.5% of the vote, making them the second largest party nationwide that gave them 73 seats in the 349 seat in the Riksdag. As a result, they went from political isolation to having real influence. Post 2022, they support a center-right coalition under the Tito Agreement. So as of mid-2025, recent polls put them around 20 to 23% of voter support. I don't buy it because these polls, time and time again, undermine the popularity of right-wing populist parties, and they overhype the popularity of the mainstream political parties. So don't be surprised if this number goes up to 30, 35%. And when that happens, boom, that's the end of the globalist, Marxist, Islamist-led world order. So let me introduce you to Denise Westerberger, who is a leader, or one of the leaders, of the Sweden Democrats. And she delivered a scathing speech that is upsetting a lot of people. So it's a long video. I'll try to speed it up a bit.
What has happened to Sweden? That's what I want to focus on in this speech. How Sweden could go from being one of the world's safest and wealthiest countries to becoming a cautionary tale for the rest of the world. But also, or perhaps most importantly, how we can return to the Sweden we lost. When I think of the Sweden that existed before the migration chaos and other issues, a Sweden I perhaps never got to experience, I wonder how politicians could let it go so far. I feel both sad for my generation that had to grow up in this chaos, but also for the generation that watched politicians make decision after decision that broke down our country. I also feel angry because it never had to be this way, but also hopeful because we Sweden Democrats have a clear plan on how to rebuild and secure Sweden again. What really happened to Sweden? What happened to the country where you could leave your door unlocked and send your kids over to the neighbors to play? Where young girls could take the subway home late at night without being harassed? What happened to the country where young boys' biggest fear or worry was getting bad grades in school, not being robbed, or threatened on their way home from soccer practice? This is Sweden, where a murder shook the entire nation for weeks. One thing we must never do is accept the new Sweden. We must not accept a reality where parents are afraid to let their children out because gangs have taken over neighborhoods. We must not accept that girls are afraid to move freely at night, no matter how many self-defense sprays they carry in their handbags. We should not accept the growing anti-Swedish sentiment that leads to boys as young as 8 years old being humiliated and robbed just because they are Swedish. When discussing how this development is even possible, how it could happen, the old parties prefer to stay silent. Because the answer is very simple but uncomfortable for some. For us in here, it's very, very clear. Sweden is in the situation it is because the old politicians and parties let it happen. They turned a blind eye and spoke beautifully about diversity while outside their own suburban neighborhoods, reality was falling apart. They opened borders and their hearts, but completely closed their eyes to the consequences. They let in people with values and views on women that have no place in Sweden, without making any demands and without protecting their own people. But now we are here. And you know what? Now it's us taking over. It's us cleaning up their mistakes. It's us ensuring that criminal gangs now end up behind bars and stay there. It is we who ensure that those who do not respect Sweden do not get to stay in Sweden. For something we need to be very clear about, it's that these streets are ours. This land is ours. Our ancestors built this country with their hands, their blood, and their love for the homeland. And now it's our turn to defend it. To stand up for Sweden, to safeguard the security, the freedom and future of Sweden is and will always be our country. Another battle we must fight for Sweden is the battle against Islamism. Many politicians, both on the left and the right, as well as liberals, seem not to grasp the seriousness or at least not dare to address it, the enormous threat that Islamism poses to our Swedish society. Because let's be honest here, migration has not only brought gang wars, it has also brought with it a culture that does not belong here, a religion that often clashes with our Swedish values, and someone has to dare to say it.
Islam has no place in the civilized world. Period. Period. If Sweden becomes a Muslim country, then she wouldn't even be able to stand there with her blonde hair and give you a speech. It's as simple as that, guys. We don't need any more experimentation. Every country you look at, look what Islam has done to that country. Every single country, without fail. Without fail. In fact, Muslims in Western countries behave even worse than they do in their home countries. You know why that is? Because they create a parallel culture in which they are always defensive, in which they are always pitting themselves against the natives, against the locals, and see that as some sort of a fight between good and evil. Like they have to make sure that Islam wins over the infidels. I'm telling you, British Pakistanis behave far worse than native Pakistanis in Pakistan. Because in Pakistan, they're not as insecure about their faith as they are in an infidel country. They're not. Who are they going to proselytize to? Why are there no Dawa boys running around in Pakistan? There are some Dawa boys, but trust me, the middle class and the elite, they don't care about it. But when you release those people in the civilized world, they get out of hand. So no, not just Islamism, Islam, period, has no place in any civilized country.
Sweden should not be a country where you see women in burqas on the streets, where teachers wear veils, or where mosques are built larger than shopping centers. Schools should not stop serving pork. Police officers should not wear garments that women in other countries have fled to escape. And we should not allow a single new mosque to be built. To take back the country, we must dare to do the uncomfortable. We must dare to say that the limit has been reached. We do not want Islamism. We do not want a culture of dominance and a misogynistic view. We do not want people who talk on speakerphone on the bus, who shout in classrooms, who circumcise their children, or force their wives to cover themselves.
Ship them out. Send them back.
Sweden is the country where we like to stand in line, where girls wear short skirts, and where the sense of community is stronger than in any other country in Europe. I can promise that I will fight to ensure that every mosque engaging in any form of extremism will be demolished.
Please, please do.
And I believe there are more mosques than we are aware of. Just yesterday, or maybe a few days ago, information came out about a 7-year-old girl being subjected to genital mutilation in a mosque in Sweden. We should not have such things in our country. And I can truly, truly promise you that Sweden will never, ever become a Muslim country. We in the young Swedes will make sure of that. My message is clear. If you want to call Sweden your country, then you need to adapt. Otherwise, you are more than welcome to take the first available flight out of here, because Sweden is worth protecting.
And if you can't afford a flight, then we will get you one.
A year ago, I stood on a stage like this as the newly elected chairman and spoke about Sweden. There were a few more people in the audience then, because it was a Saturday and people weren't as hungover. But those lying in their hotel rooms can listen to this later. Back then, I talked about how Sweden once was, my visions for the future, and my hopes. And much has happened since then. We have implemented reforms that are truly changing our country. We have halved deadly gun violence since 2022. We have increased penalties, doubling them for gang criminals. We have made life sentences possible for rapists. And we have finally started to curb the completely irresponsible immigration policy that has ruined our country for decades. Asylum immigration is now at its lowest in modern times. Deportations are increasing, we have cut benefits, raised requirements, and started removing bureaucratic nonsense that previously hindered deportations. But we also know that the work is far from finished, and that there is still a lot that needs to change in Swedish migration policy. One of the clearest examples of this could be read by all of us a few weeks ago when 16-year-old Maya stepped forward and shared her story, which I want to share with you here today. Maya was on her way home from her part-time job talking on the phone with her girlfriend, just like many of us girls do, to feel a bit safer. But as she was heading home and entered the underpass, the unthinkable happened. A man ran up to her, attacked her, and raped her. On the phone is Maja's girlfriend, who witnesses parts of the assault. The man, according to the media, is Yazid Mohammed, an unaccompanied migrant from Eritrea. The police arrest Yazid Mohammed after he shows up at Maja's school a few days after the assault. He is detained but later acquitted in the district court and released despite strong evidence.
I covered that one. I think that's the one where they said that it did not last long enough. That's what the judge said. I think that's the one that made global headlines. Look how terrible that is. Yazid Mohammed. How typical.
The men who voted for his acquittal were mentioned. What can we guess? A Social Democrat and a Center Party member. After this, Meja has to encounter her rapist several times in her hometown. But the case is taken to the Court of Appeal. Mohammed is convicted of the assault rape. So what is his sentence? 3 years in prison and no deportation, despite not having Swedish citizenship. The rape was not considered severe enough for him to be deported. Yazid Mohammed will now, or in a few years, be released from prison and be able to live freely in Sweden. This case is one of many that highlight the enormous betrayal that the old party's migration policies have meant for us girls. That our safety in our own country has been torn away from us because the Social Democrats and moderates refuse to open their eyes to the obvious threat that migration would entail. I hope you are ashamed. To Yazid Mohammed and all other foreign rapists in Sweden, I want to say that when the Sweden Democrats take power in less than 10 months, you will be expelled, whether you have Swedish citizenship or not. Because we're going to win the next election and secure Jimmy Åkesson's place as Prime Minister. But this won't happen on its own. It requires strength, commitment, and conviction. And that strength is within us. For we in the young Swedes are not just the future of Sweden, but also the engine of the movement. We are the generation that refuses to stay silent as our country deteriorates. The generation that will fight in schools, in squares, in debates, and on social media. And we are thousands of young people passionate about the same cause. To win the election, absolutely, but also to win back Sweden. And to give our generation and the next a future worth believing in. And let me make it clear, the young Swedes will be a significant and strong part of the Sweden Democrats' election campaign. We will show Sweden that the young generation supports the change that has begun in recent years with the current cooperation and is truly pushing for the necessary transformation. Despite my perhaps somewhat dystopian speech here today, I actually have hope for the future. I gain hope when I travel around and meet all the thousands of young people who, just like me, fight for Sweden every day. When I see the policies we are implementing and the very positive opinion polls ahead of the next election, I feel optimistic about the future. If we continue to drive change in Sweden at this pace and increase it after the election, I have a bright outlook. My hope, and something I genuinely believe in, is that for my future children, gang wars will only be a chapter title in the history books. Mass immigration is just a warning example. My future sons should never have to fear being robbed by immigrant gangs because they are Swedish. My future daughters should be able to walk home alone at night without looking over their shoulders. That is what I am fighting for. That is what we are all fighting for. Now we take back our Sweden. For those of you who experienced it but saw it disappear. For us who never got to experience it. And for the children who will one day grow up in a Sweden that has regained its former glory. For Sweden will be Sweden again. Thank you.
So, sorry, I had to play you the whole speech because it is powerful. It was an AI translated video, so you couldn't hear the claps. But it's happening everywhere, guys. It's happening everywhere. Suddenly, the most enlightened people in the world who open their borders, who open their neighborhoods, who open their hearts to people from all over the world, suddenly, within a generation, they are becoming more and more nationalist, more and more tribal, more and more protective of their culture. Why? It's because they were told that, all humans are equal. Let them all come in and sing Kumbaya, but it doesn't work that way. Some cultures are barbaric, primitive, archaic, and ancient. And they have no place in the civilized world. And Islam is one such culture. So keep Islam out of your country.